Hi everyone, just a quick video again this week to go over some of the things that we talked about last week and to introduce some of the concepts that we're talking about this week. First thing I wanted to mention is the discussion board. I've really enjoyed the discussion this week. I know it's kind of a strange topic. I know it seems like we're trying to talk about two separate things, defining news based on what's important and defining news based on what's interesting to people. And I did that on purpose, and I think the definitions do that on purpose because there isn't really one clear, distinct definition of news. The way to define news actually is individual. It's based on the reporter. And the skill that I find is needed most of all among journalists right now is to be able to defend that decision, to be able to say, this is why I chose this story, this is why I chose to present the information in the way I did, and this is the purpose that I hoped to fulfill by telling the story this way. Too much of what happens, I think, is reporters go out and they do a story thinking, oh, people will want to read this, and they don't really think about the implications of it. They don't think about, well, if I cover, all of Lindsay Lohan's exploits, am I going to sell newspapers, or am I going to encourage kids to do things that they're not supposed to do? It's kind of one of the pitfalls that we find ourselves in as a news business, and it's a fine line that journalists have to walk, especially as we think about the internet. The internet provides so much information for people that's interesting. I can go on Perez Hilton and I can read all the celebrity gossip that I want. And as you'll read in the chapter this week, on the internet I can customize the news. If that's all I want to read about is Perez Hilton and celebrity gossip, I can make it that way. But what we need to do as journalists, and where journalists are different from bloggers and from citizen journalists and from other people that you're kind of read about this week, is that training that we have, is our focus on the facts, our focus on verifying information, our focus on providing information to people that's useful, that they can use to make decisions in their lives. And I think that's really about the only thing that differentiates a journalist and a non-journalist. And when you read the chapters this week that talk about bloggers and you look at some of the examples that I put in the PowerPoint, that's what I'm trying to present. You can be a blogger, you don't have to be a journalist, you don't have to work for the New York Times. You can have a blog, but to call yourself a journalist, you have to focus on those things. Focus on truth, focus on providing information that people can use to make decisions, focus on educating rather than just entertaining. And that's the fine line that journalists have to walk. We want to respond to our audiences. We want to talk to them. We want to engage them. The internet allows us to do that. But we can't do that at the expense of some of the other core journalistic principles. And I think that's why news organizations have kind of gotten into trouble. Before the internet, they were too focused on one end, on we're the arbiters of news. We're the only ones that can tell you what's important. Now sometimes I see that news is too much on the other end. They're saying, oh, you're the people, you're in control, tell us what you want us to cover. And that doesn't quite work. One of the examples that I present is CNN's iReport, and I've done quite a bit of research on that. And I think as a concept it's a good idea. But when it gets in trouble is when CNN starts ceding some of those editorial functions back to the audience. On that screenshot I gave you, it shows how they kind of cover their bases. They say, hey, this is not vetted unless it has a CNN logo on it. And I agree with the idea of presenting an open forum for people to present, but don't diminish that vetting power either. The last site you look at, Fwix.com, I was able to interview the CEO and talk to him about why he does the news the way he is. And he's very much about applying those journalistic traditions and those ideals to news, and not just mainstream news, but looking at the bloggers and are they doing things that are useful that we can apply. That's what I'm asking you to do this week. Take those definitions of news, apply them to some of those sites that I have in the PowerPoint. Visit some of the links, check them out, and ask yourself, how is this useful? What can I do with this? How can I maybe apply some of these things to the publications that I supervise or that I might supervise later on? On those PowerPoint slides that have the links and have the screenshots from pages, I encourage you to visit those and ask yourselves those questions. I know it's not specifically the discussion board topic that I posted for the week, but if you want to talk about that on the discussion board, I'm all for that. You don't necessarily have to follow that weekly schedule that I posted at the beginning of class, to the letter. I do that for those of you that wanted to work ahead, so you know what to talk about. But I also know that things will come up as the class goes, and as I look at assignments and read your discussion board posts and blog posts and things. So you can, that's flexible. As long as you're covering the basis talked about in the syllabus, you'll be okay. The other thing that I wanted you to gain from this week's discussion in PowerPoint is a little bit of practical knowledge about how to create links. I noticed in some of your blog posts, a lot of you are including the entire URL. Make sure you're linking to keywords, and look at some of those tips that I had on why we provide links and what kind of links we need to provide. The final thing I want to talk about is this week on Wednesday, your one-page memo about your final project is due. Now that's one page, double-spaced. I don't need a ton of detail, but I want to get you thinking about the project that you want to work on. And look on our Blackboard side. I have some specific things that I'm looking for in that. But really, I want to see your idea. I want to see a couple of people that you might mention you might interview as potential sources for the project. And I want to know a couple of the multimedia things that you're thinking about doing. Now remember, if you look at the discussion, I want multimedia elements. You don't have to do all of those things. You can pick and choose from among that list. I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, of course, email me or post it on the discussion board. I look forward to hearing from you. And on Monday, check back and look for kind of what I call a summary file where I go through your blog points and highlight the points that I think are the best, that I think are really helpful to other members of the class. So with that said, we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.